Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Quint. You're watching the fine print. Over the last 40 days or so on our special series GST Countdown, we spoke with retailers, distributors, manufacturers, GSPs, ASPs and small businesses to try and understand some of the challenges that businesses are facing as they gear up for the July 1st deadline of GST. But the challenges are not just limited to technology or pain on transition stock or registration, but also stem from the rules that will govern this indirect tax regime come July 1st. So, over the course of this week and next, we are going to dive deep into the fine print of some of the rules such as valuation, anti-profiteering, rules on the return. So, on to today's agenda. The applicability of the state GST, central GST and IGST will depend on something known as the place of supply. So, if the supply takes place within a state, CGST, that is the state GST, and the central GST become applicable. But if the supply happens interstate, then the integrated GST will become applicable. Now, it sounds all very simple, but I'm told that it's throwing up huge challenges for the banking, insurance, and other service industry players. To answer some of the solutions to these challenges, I have with me today on the GST Countdown, Suresh Rohira, partner at Northon. Suresh, I put it very simply, but I'm told by many experts like you that the place of supply is one area where service industry is struggling. Okay, so just let's start with the basics, right? The place of supply provisions will be governed by the location of the supplier and the location of the receiver of those goods and services, right?
Correct.
Right. Okay. Why is then that a big challenge to? Because it's going to be very clear, right? The person who's supplying the goods or services and the person who's receiving it. Why is it at the very macro level becoming a problem for industry?
Well, okay, let me explain you that firstly the government has tried putting the design in a very nice fashion, and the design is indeed good. They have kept the focus on the principles, and as you rightly mentioned, the principles are the location of the supplier, the location of the recipient, where the service has been consumed, and where the actual benefit gets passed on.
Right.
So the fundamental principle is of consumption or a destination based tax.
Right.
So the supplier and the receiver. Now, while we speak of supplier and receiver, there are circumstances which the authorities have tried clarifying in the Q&A. Yeah. So just some time back they had rolled out the second Q&A book wherein they had given certain illustrations. But to share with you, if one were to look at it from the perspective of two baskets, and those two baskets today are goods and services.
Right.
So clearly under goods they have laid down certain provisions specifying situations where there is a movement of goods.
Yeah, I was coming to that.
Yeah.
There could be two situations, right, which involves a movement of goods and which doesn't involve a movement of goods. Yeah. Can you help me with some examples how place of supply is becoming a challenge there?
Sure. So to share with you, for example, movement of goods. If goods are moving from state A to state B,
right,
the provision says that wherever there is termination of delivery happening of those goods.
Right.
So for example, if the termination of delivery is happening from state A to B,
right,
it would be clearly IGST.
Right.
But
we can totally use the lovely whiteboard and a marker here for our audiences to better understand the concepts. Please feel free.
So for example, there is state X where I am present and I am moving goods to state Y.
Right.
And this is the state border.
Correct.
So clearly this transaction would go under IGST.
Sure.
Because it's an
interstate
transaction, you pay integrated GST.
Right.
Similarly, if the situation is I am supplying within the state to Z, then I pay CGST and SGST. Now this is very clear. But what happens in a situation where I am contacted by a customer which is in state Y. So there is a customer A,
right,
who contacts me for certain supplies,
right,
and I do not have the ability to supply.
right.
Okay.
So the customer picks up the consignment from this place?
Yes.
Okay.
So for example, the customer picks up the consignment from place which is called X Works.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in such a situation, where there is no movement of goods, unless and until I know that where is he gonna transport the goods,
Right.
I have to simply charge him CNS, because the termination of delivery.
What is CNS?
The CGST and SGST.
Okay, so you're calling it
The
C and S. Actually, C and S. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
And IGST. Got it.
So accordingly, I have to charge him C and S.
Right.
But clearly, if you were to look at the provisions, when there is a B2B transaction,
Right.
so this is a B2B transaction.
Correct.
I would clearly get his GSTN number
Right.
into my systems,
Right.
which would say that it's an entity outside the state. Now, one has to watch this in the days to come, that whether the systems will allow me to incorporate the GSTN number, which is of a different state, and charge him CNS, which is of the state where I am situated. Or would I need to charge him IGST, because I do not know if I am supplying it X Works, I do not know whether he is going to take it to state B, state C, whatever location. So, what is expected out of the authorities is some sort of clarification, more clarification, and clarifying the gamut of it.
So you will require some sort of a specific form to capture this information?
No. So today, if you were to look at the invoice, the
Yeah.
invoice format has couple of main factors: the location of the supplier, the location of the recipient.
But it doesn't envisage a situation like this.
Envisage a situation like this. It
Okay.
does talk of situations which are commonly known in today's scenario, called bill to ship to.
Okay.
So you are billing it to somebody, but you are shipping it to somebody. So, for example, in the same situation, if the customer had contacted me and I did not have the ability to manufacture, and I had asked another dealer, another manufacturer to
In another
manufacture
state.
in the same state,
In the same
probably,
state, okay, yeah.
and he would physically supply to him,
Okay,
okay, but raise an invoice on me.
right,
So he is not privy to the arrangement between us.
correct.
Then in that case, although the termination of delivery is happening here, the provision is very clear that it will be the address of the
Supplier.
recipient. So supplier is
Is here.
Is here.
Okay, a supplier in this guy's context.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So he's supplying him here, so he would charge IGST.
Right.
Okay, although the physical delivery is happening here.
Okay.
Now I'm sure in his invoice, he would show this as a B2B transaction, but in his invoice, he would certainly show that the place of supply is within the state, because this supply is within the state. Then obviously, as per the provisions, it's clear that one need not charge CGST and SGST, and it will be IGST,
Okay, okay.
because it's a B2B transaction here, and he in turn would then charge IGST. Now, having said so, there is another dichotomy which prevails. So, if I were to take the same situation as you know, I acting as a trader. Okay, if I am acting as a trader, he is supplying to me at 100, and I am asking him to dispatch it physically over here.
Okay.
And knowing that the concept of e-way bill
Right.
is going to be clarified soon,
Yeah. Yet to come.
yet to come.
Right.
Now, what we understand is in the e-way bill, you will have to mention the value of goods.
Correct.
Now, if you were to mention the value of goods, it will become a larger problem for me if I am X. The reason being, he is supplying it to me at 100, whereas my arrangement here is probably 175.
So you're saying the margins will be known among players?
Would get revealed, and if the margins are getting revealed, then I would never want to conduct such a transaction.
Such a transaction.
I would rather say that fine, looking at the transaction, I house myself in this state, or maybe let the goods come over here, but I can't afford the transportation of back and forth. So one has to see that would the government also consider such transactions and such nuances, and come up with some solution where even the traders sitting in some other state are able to conduct business. because eventually, if I am a trader and I am doing business, I know a set of customers. I wouldn't want to lose my margin or reveal my margins to any manufacturer.
Okay.
So while GST is important, and I must acknowledge the fact, considering the time frame and the efforts which they have put in, the design is pretty good, but there is some level of clarity needed in the design.
Yeah, these crisscrosses make me feel a lot of clarity needs to be given. Can I request you to just grab that duster from there so that we can make space for more examples? Okay, this is the goods part of it, Suresh. Services is the area which is, flummoxed with the place of supply provisions even more. Again, like with goods, we were looking at the location of the supplier and the location of the recipient. When it comes to services, how is it determined? From the first glance that I could get, it's based on whether the person or the recipient of the service is registered or not registered, right?
Yes, absolutely. So the fundamental or the default rule which the authorities have laid down is to say that wherever there is a B2B transaction, it will be the location of the service provider and the recipient. And in case of B2C, if the address is appearing on record, then whatever is the address and that location. If address is not on record, then it will be the location of service provider.
Okay.
Now
so if I can just break it down, so if I'm doing a plumbing work for this space and I'm a registered plumber, it will be my GSTN number that will reflect on the invoice. But if I am an unregistered plumber, then you as the person who is taking that service, your GSTN number will reflect on the invoice, right?
Yes. So since I am just a customer who's living in an apartment, I do not have any GSTN number, for example.
Okay,
but
so
you are in the business of plumbing,
right.
So clearly you would have the GSTN number.
No, there could be plumbers who don't get a GSTN number.
So if there are situations where the plumbers are below the threshold of 20 lakhs, that's fine. But let's take a situation if the plumber is about 20 lakhs.
Okay.
Then clearly you would raise an invoice, charging me GST, and in that case I would be the unregistered one.
Okay.
So because it's B2C.
Okay, so you are the flat owner who is getting apartment owner. Okay, who's getting.
So then in that case, very clearly you would charge me CGST, SGST.
Right.
And since it's to an unregistered person, it will be the location of the provider.
Okay, understood.
So that's, while that's one of the scenarios, but under services sector, the complexities are even larger.
Okay.
To give you one of the examples, take a situation, you are an event organizer. Okay, and we both of us. So let me give an example.
Sure.
So take a situation. We both of us are in the same state, which is Maharashtra. So I'm X and you are Y in Maharashtra. Okay. Now I'm engaging you, and for an event which would cost probably 2 CR.
Okay.
And the event is to conduct a gala wedding or some function which is in Haryana. Okay. Now, clearly what the authorities have done is, apart from the default rule, they have laid down certain provisions under the I think section 12(3). So 12(3) to 14 is where they have clarified various situations. So for example, a hotel or event, banking, so on and so forth. So they have clarified. So in case of an event which is related to an immovable property, they have said that it will be the location where the event
takes place.
So clearly in this scenario, the event is taking place outside the state. Okay. And the transaction is here.
Right. So the IGST will apply.
So so what would apply? The first question would be that if you are the event organizer, would you charge me simply C and S because we are in the same state?
Yeah.
One were to think like that,
Logically
because we are even so, take a situation. I am an entity, and I'm going to pay you 2 CR, via that entity. We are in the same state, but reading the provisions, it says the place of supply would be the location.
But wouldn't that be obvious, Suresh? Because principally GST is a consumption-based tax,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes.
the consumption state is
Yes.
the one that
Yes, absolutely.
then becomes the essence of it.
Yeah, and that's where I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
The essence of GST is consumption-based or destination-based. So therefore, very clearly, the place of supply is over here.
Right.
Now, the point here is, would you charge me IGST? Which I guess so.
Yeah.
For the reason, because whatever tax you would charge, and for example, it's, as you know, 18%.
Right, for services.
The tax goes to the government kitty.
Correct.
Okay, and then government would identify depending on the place of supply and accordingly remit to that state. So the point here is, and which is what I said earlier as well, that what are the parameters or what are the factors for the authorities to establish and to evaluate, or rather to determine whether the place of supply is the criteria to remit, or it's the GSTN number. So for example, the GSTN number which I would give you would be of Maharashtra. So
Because I will not have a GST number in Haryana, right?
in Haryana,
In X
correct.
or Y, if they're not
Yes,
operating in Haryana,
yes.
they will not have a
So
GST
the
number.
invoice which you would raise on me, you would take my GSTN number, which is a Maharashtra number, and on that invoice you would make a mention of place of supply as Haryana. So my point is that, are the authorities going to capture the place of supply and then try to identify and remit the taxes? Or what is the mechanism? Because
I know, Suresh, that decisions like
Yeah.
these weddings or
Yeah.
any business decisions are not
Yeah.
just driven by, or will not just be driven by GST. But if we were to hypotheticate that until such clarity comes on this, consumers, whether it is individual consumers or business consumers,
Sure.
would rather have somebody within that state provide them those services than fetch them from outside their state.
Yeah. So one may start thinking that way, but at the same time, as you know, for example, event organizers. I know of the best event organizers sitting
Yeah.
in
LA.
Gurgaon. Yeah,
And
so-
even LA.
even
We'll
LA,
come to
yeah.
that, yeah.
So I would want them to come and render services over here.
Yeah, of course, right.
So very clearly there are several situations which the authorities may have thought of and would want to clarify, and they should clarify to eliminate the litigation. So
Sure.
in this scenario, if you would have charged me C and S, clearly that S would go to Maharashtra, which would be incorrect,
Correct.
and you would charge me IGST.
So it's basically the authorities in Haryana who will raise the hue and cry,
Yes.
and come after Y, the entity, or come after the state X.
Yes,
The S. the state.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely correct.
Okay, all right.
Because eventually the consumption
Is
happened
happening.
in Haryana, where everyone came down,
Yeah.
enjoyed the event.
Right. And
So-
Haryana gets no money. Okay.
Haryana gets no
Tell
money,
me, how is this playing out? So this is a little flavor of the hospitality sector. Tell me how it's playing out in the banking and insurance industry.
Well, okay. For example, in insurance industry, if I were to take another example, what the insurance industry says, and they have come to this conclusion that today a lot of insurance companies, they have central locations where all the policies are generated. So for example, I'm in Mumbai. I have the server in Mumbai where the policies are generated, and I have presence all across the country in 29 states.
Via my agents, could be. Or even a digitally accessible platform, right?
Yeah. So very correctly, digitally accessed platform, agents. Now, agent could be in Chennai, and the policy could be for one individual in Chennai and the other one in Kolkata. So I have a central server. Now, clearly from a central server standpoint, there is the policy originates or gets generated from the central server.
And you would think that IGST would apply.
I would ideally think that the authorities need to clarify that even if one were to charge IGST from a central location, which is Maharashtra, to that particular location, it should be acceptable, for the reason because what is the intent? The intent is in the state where the service is getting consumed or destined should get the revenue. Distinct of the arrangement that one has to raise an invoice from the local offices to call it as CGST, SGST. Also stretching that thought further, if you were to look at the CGST and SGST, I can very well understand the state GST is the concern for every state, whereas CGST is a central levy. And today, if you were to look at the provisions, there is no complete clarity that a CGST is eventually a CGST and it should be fungible everywhere. Because
Correct.
there is no problem in terms of CGST fungibility.
Yeah.
So whereas the provisions today, they talk of the fungibility of IGST towards CNS in the chronological order, but doesn't talk anywhere. One has to infer an analogy and try to develop.
Okay, so the same problem will happen with banks as well, right? Currently they have a centralized registration, but services are being provided across state borders, right, by a particular bank branch. Even as simple as if I have, say for instance, my account in the Kamala Mills branch of HDFC, but I'm withdrawing money in Chennai, how will the tax levy work?
Yeah, so this was the question which even the banks were asking and they were worried about. Of course, the final outcome is the banks have decided that they would be raising invoices from each and every state because they have presence in all the states. But to give you a simplistic answer, the authorities could clarify going forward that even if it is an IGST transaction raised from the central location, so far the place of supply is mentioned, that the place of supply is the state where service is getting consumed or being passed on. Eventually that's the state who would get the revenue.
Okay.
If I were to take another example, for example, I am a service company. I am present in Gujarat and you are also in Gujarat, and we have our HO in Gujarat, both of us, and the service contract is between two HOs. Now practically the service which is to be rendered, so the location and the recipient of service is within the same state. The services have to be rendered probably in 12 states. Okay, so out of 12 states, take a scenario, 3 states, the services of the nature which has immovable property. So I am rendering a service of evaluating the condition of your building, doing examination of the structure,
Inspection testing kind of situation.
inspection testing. Now three locations are immovable, whereas 9 locations the service is movable, or you can say intangible in that sense, which does not require and it goes to the default provision. Today the format of the invoice does not give you the flexibility to mention place of supply at multiple locations.
You can't make a little mark there of some sort and add your own header there. No, I'm a little kidding, but I'm sure it's a concern for huge, for businesses. There's also a concern in the airline industry, right, where global contracts come into the picture.
Indeed, yeah. So in terms of airlines, I must tell you that as you know, the airline services and companies who are providing services to airlines, they go crisscross. So take a situation, I am providing services to a foreign airline and there's a global contract. So the services are being provided maybe in 100 plus countries, including India. Now that's where it's exactly here where the confusion starts, because if you were to look at the provisions today, it talks of place of supply, recipient of supply, location of service provider, location of service receiver. What happens in a situation if I have rendered service within the country to a foreign airline and the HO of foreign airline has paid directly to my HO and my HO is making payment to me for the work which I have done within India. So the arrangement is between me and my HO overseas. Okay, the services have been rendered within the country. I am receiving in foreign exchange. Okay, so typically if you were to look at the provisions, it's B2B or between distinct persons. it should be exempt, because I am receiving in foreign exchange. The services which are being rendered to the foreign airline in India would never book expenses, because he is getting invoice from his HO for the services which I have rendered. The reason being, the arrangement, the commercial arrangement is between two HOs overseas. So these kind of situations, the authorities need to do something about it. And overall, my sense is that while they have tried keeping the principles very clear, which is consumption based or a destination based, they need to give more flexibility, keeping in mind such scenarios, and they should come up with certain sub rules or illustrations, considering to give the gamut appropriately.
Okay, so the one key takeaway that I can figure out from all the examples across industries that you mentioned, that the formats currently don't give you the flexibility of adding GST and numbers in this sort of a situation. Okay, if I can just borrow the marker, what I want to ask is that the illustration that you just mentioned here, okay, between can I mean, by the looks of it, and I know the answer to it is no, can I not let Maharashtra and Haryana figure out and between themselves who gets what tax, but I anticipate there's going to be a credit problem here somewhere for me as a business?
No,
after, say for instance, I was supposed to levy IGST, right? But I have done this combination, right? Now, it's not like I haven't discharged my tax liability. It's just that, I've got the combination wrong because it's not clear. In that situation, what will happen to the business? What could be the repercussions for businesses then?
So, what do the provisions talk about is that in such a situation where you have wrongly charged, instead of IGST, it is CNS. The first thing you need to do is you need to charge the correct tax, and you need to deposit the correct tax. If it is within the time frame, then it's fine. If it is outside the time frame, then you are also liable to pay interest.
No, so this is after I have paid CNS. If I am supposed to pay IGST and not this, I do this 18% again on this transaction.
On this transaction,
and
then
pay IGST.
You go for refund of CNS.
Oh, which will be a working capital issue, right?
Which will be a major working capital issue. So there are a couple of worrisome factors over here. The first factor is on day one, 1st of July, everyone's fear is that whether they would be raising correct invoices, they would be charging correct tax. Second is, if not, then what happens to the working capital? Because by the time you file your return, which the government has postponed, by 2 months, then you get your refunds, and then you figure out what is the correct, method of charging. Subsequently, whether there will be any penal consequences and so on and so forth. So my sense is that while these are issues with which the industry would grapple, obviously because it's a gigantic tax reform, what the authorities can do at such a juncture is give some comfort to the industry by being vocal that if there is a relaxation required, we would look at it. Even if some feelers, if they were to look at, I'm sure it'll instill confidence in the industry, and it'll also give them some preparation time, because the preparation is not only in terms of the structure, but also in terms of IT, compliances. The example which I gave you of banking or service industry now has to take their compliances manifold, because earlier I was filing one service tax return which is apparently known everywhere, and now I would be filing 3 per month. So
wow, it almost sounds like an exam paper of multiple choice answer, whether the right answer is CNS or IGST. Thank you, Suresh, for taking us through some of the challenges that businesses are facing. We've not even scratched the surface on the place of supply provision. So if you still have any questions, do write into us, and we'll come back tomorrow on the GST Countdown with another set of rules for you. Thank you so much for watching.